All right, welcome to this week's episode of BRC and Friends. I'm really excited. I have a new friend, Sarah Stonesifer Boylan, who we've met.
Internet friend.
Yeah, which we met, out of kind of this, all the things have been going on in the world, and finally figured we should just sit down and chat. We've kind of been in groups and some other stuff, and I'll kind of come to an event later on next year, which we'll plug, or later on this year, which we'll plug a little bit. But as I do, I just invite friends who join us to introduce themselves. So Sarah, by the way, you're Sarah with an H, which is my mother. The way that
I am. That's the only correct way of spelling it.
Of course, people without the H say that it's Sarah.
It's true.
Right.
I've heard that argument many times.
Yeah. All right. So tell us who Sarah is. Give us all the pertinent information about who you are, where you're from, all those kinds of fun things.
Oh, yeah. I always forget to introduce where I'm from. So my name is Sarah Stonesifer Boylan. I'm the digital missioner and manager of operations for the Lifelong Learning Department at Virginia Theological Seminary, which is an Episcopal seminary located outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. I've been in that role, or various iterations of that role, for almost 4 years. So I'm heading into my fifth year, which is a little bit amazing when I start thinking about it. So I am Episcopalian. If it was possible that I was Episcopal in the womb, I think that would have actually happened.
All right.
I'm a PK, priest kid.
Mm-hmm.
And have been for my entire life. And
that's so funny because we call them pastors' kids, you call them priest kids.
Oh yeah, it somehow it works in whatever denomination
so
you are.
That's
PK
funny.
as that abbreviation. I don't know. Somehow that all.
Yep, it all figured out.
And so I grew up in the DC area, and so I very much still affiliate with all of that. And so I was very involved in the Episcopal Church, beginning really in my as a high schooler, when I started working at my sort of regional body level, which we call a diocese, working with youth ministry there. And so from there, I just continued to work a lot and volunteer at the diocese a lot, at the diocesan level a lot. So I went off to college. I majored in, this is probably not the amount of detail that most people go into.
Oh, it's fine. Love it.
Art history and cinema studies.
Where did you go to school?
I went to University of Maryland, College Park.
Okay. Awesome.
So go Terps. And then I also got my master's degree in library science from Maryland as well. So I was a school librarian for 6 years at independent schools, so really focusing on middle and high school students and teachers, and sometimes their parents. And throughout all of that, I was still volunteering at my church, and then also at my diocese as well. So I was on Bishop Search Committee, on Standing Committee, which is sort of like the Bishop's Advisory Board. I helped to start a camp through the Diocese of Washington. Other church nerd stuff, like showing up at conventions. Bruce and I were talking about it before we started recording, of just denominational nerds. It's totally okay to be one.
It is.
And then when I was hoping for a change, I called up my now boss, Lisa Kimball, and said, hey, this is where I'm thinking I want to shift more into church work, where, can you help me? Not realizing that I was essentially asking her to have a discernment conversation with me. That was not a word that was in my vocabulary before showing up to work at the seminary. And through the past 4 years, I've become the eFormation Learning Community Coordinator and Convener for that.
Tell us what eFormation is.
eFormation started off as a conference, and then sort of continued on to expand out the roles, really focusing on digital media for ministry. And when it was started in 2012, it really was like trying to understand how that Christian formation people could grapple with this newfound internet 2.0 thing that was happening.
It's not just a fad. Is that basically?
It is not just a fad.
It's probably going to stick around.
Exactly. And so since then, it really has been about like blending the basics of Christian formation and the not basics of Christian formation with the basics and advanced tools that are on the internet. So educational technology, social media, communications. Now I've really gotten into hardware for some reason. Like everyone keeps asking me their hardware questions, which is super fascinating. So that's been one of my many roles. I'm also the project manager and for Advent Word, which is a daily meditation and visual image during the season of Advent. This year it starts on November 29th, FYI. And that is a global international Advent calendar where we ask people to contribute their meditations and images back around that same word. I say, if that's not interesting enough, I'm also on the executive council of the Episcopal Church, which is the governing board or board of directors.
Man, you are a church nerd.
I told you.
Wow.
You thought I was holding back. And so I'm on the executive council for the Episcopal Church, sort of like, again, board of trustees kind of thing for the Episcopal Church. And I'm also in a doctorate program at Vanderbilt in leadership and learning and organization. So really focusing on how we can bring in those best practices around leadership and organizational theory into the church space. I also have a dog, and I have a husband. I'm located now in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. Are you really?
Yeah, that's why I'm in Central Time.
Oh, I was wondering. I was like, what? Okay. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's very cool. So the funny story I have of Sarah is, so when all of this COVID stuff started, you know, the congregation I'm serving was pretty quick into Zoom, and I think it was I'm new at that church, and you know, my level of very little anxiety about it was really helpful to the church, and you know, I don't know, Sarah, if you know kind of my background, but kind of working with our denomination and for good or bad, have been you know, kind of a go-to person for a little bit, and so I started to do this work around here's what you could do, and then you popped in. And I will say that I appreciated kind of the way that you entered the conversation, because I think some folks who have been connected to technology and social media and all those kind of things just can be kind of jerks and be like, well, it's about time you got here, or I say, I told you so, or oh my God, I can't believe you don't know how to unmute yourself, right? And I'm just like, that is not helpful. Like, people are, and so when you jumped into a Twitter feed and started interacting, I was like, this is great. This is somebody. So I, you know, I don't know you, but I DM'd you and was like, it's always weird when you don't know somebody and you're like, hey, and then you got back to me and you said, I'm on my honeymoon. I'm like, oh my goodness. I think I responded like, and I hope whoever is with you is giving you the side eye, because
he was. Don't worry.
I'm just like, you're on your honeymoon? Really, Zoom is not that important. I promise.
We were walking through Disney. I was talking about Zoom digital worship.
So you were one of the last people to get to go to Disney then, before.
Yeah, somehow we didn't even think of not going.
Right, it wasn't at that point yet.
Yeah, it was like there was wipes and, you know, hand sanitizer everywhere, but we just sort of.
Yeah.
We were just like tunnel vision. Like we needed to do this.
Better then than now.
Exactly.
You might catch a little flack. We're going to Disney because we don't care. What is your area like these days? So California, we just extended one more month of shelter in place. What's Louisiana doing?
Yeah, we're doing something a little different. So I'm located in Lafayette, which is a suburb of Baton Rouge.
Right.
So a little bit off the beaten path of where everything exploded in New Orleans.
And college town, right?
Yeah, that's where University of Louisiana is.
Okay.
And so they are like reopening some retail
Wow.
and starting with very certain measures. Let me put that asterisk on it, of 25% capacity, that there has to be proper wipe down measures after a checkout. But they're also opening up restaurants for outside patio seating. So very different. Very different.
Yeah.
Here.
I mean, that's going to be interesting. So has that been opening, or is that starting up?
That's starting on Friday.
Oh, okay. It'll be interesting to see, and this will lead us into some of our conversations. you know, whether people will come back. I think that's
Mhm.
the question, right? They can open, and I'm sure some are going to because they're just going to do it. But
Right.
in our area, things will loosen probably in 2 or 3 weeks. There may be a few things,
Right.
but we're not in any hurry to go sit down in a restaurant. Like I'm probably not going back for a while. We'll order takeout, we'll support, but
Yeah,
I'm not.
there are some things that I am still incredibly wary of, and I think it just has to do with other people.
Yeah. Yep.
Like I don't know about their health.
Yep.
And if I am an asymptomatic carrier, I also don't know about their health, and
Yep.
so I would feel incredibly guilty if I infected somebody. So
Yep.
it's a complicated.
I mean, that whole idea of this is like, it's not about us as individuals. Like, I think that that's the thing that frustrates me the most through a lot of these conversations, that folks are they're making it about themselves, and it's just not. And oh my goodness, I will say I'm glad to be living in California right now, where like this super bubble
You
of
were on
caution.
super lockdown
Oh yeah,
early.
yeah. I mean, it's struggling. It's, all those kind of things, but our government and our municipalities are leading. I mean, and for the
Mm.
most part, people are behaving. We've had this warm heat wave ish thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Where everybody ended up at the beaches.
Yeah, and that part was like, but yeah. Anyway, all right.
Yeah,
So
it was interesting, like right at the beginning, because I was in Louisiana and we came back and there was one Sunday where we were still in the service in
yeah,
the church. But then in DC and in Virginia, everything had already shut down.
yeah,
And so I was like living this weird,
yeah,
like dual understanding life about what was going on and what was in two very different places.
right,
And so that was really tough,
yeah,
to like have people in Louisiana saying like, well, we're going to do this as long as we can, and the DC area of like, no, we've already shut, and we know that we're going to be shut for whatever the
yeah,
number of weeks were when they started for.
yeah.
And so that was a very like interesting.
Right,
Like,
because you're living it. I mean, you're seeing how other people are reacting, and then watching, and then, well, that was the struggle for our church. I mean, we were pretty early. We were very early before the shelter-in-place orders were put out. Our church shut, so we had a few folks that did the whole, isn't it just the flu? And we had a few folks like, can't we just do one more Sunday? And I'm so proud of our session, and that there were a couple that said, the principle is the principle, right? If we don't want to participate in helping to spread this, we don't want to participate in helping to spread it. And so we're going to do this.
and it goes back to, and this is not telling tales on anyone
Yeah.
in particular, but
Yeah.
like across the nation, I had all of my colleagues say, we kept on offering services, and the people who were showing up were the exact people who we were trying to protect.
Yep.
Of that, it was the people who had, who are older, who have immune system issues, and
Yep.
if the doors are open, they show
They're going to
up.
be there.
Because,
Yeah.
like, that's their attitude.
Yeah.
But that was not the point.
Yep. Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, we're now, our seniors are telling us they're not going to come back. I mean, in some ways, I'm going to take it as a credit to what our staff and we have been able to do with our Zoom service, is that like, this is great.
We're good here.
Yeah, like, until we know that we're not going to get sick, why would we come back? And I'm like, yeah, that's so. What is so?
A
So
lot of
let's
people are waiting for a vaccine, and
yeah,
then they'll feel comfortable.
yeah, and that's going to be
after the second spike.
yeah, and exactly that's going to. And I'm trying to get us to stop talking about like during, like this, just to use the word during, because it makes it feel like there's an end. Like when folks are like, well, let's just do it during this time. I'm like, this time during is till Easter. Like, what are we really talking about? So let me ask you. So let's start with just as you've been watching and talking with people, and you're in a variety of groups, and and all that kind of stuff. What are the things that at the beginning do you think folks were most worried about that they ended up kind of not needing to worry about? Like, what were some of the things you were hearing just in terms of people kind of just, I think, really anxious about this online kind of thing, and that they ended up working through. I want to kind of like, what are the good stories or the
Well, it's like a wonderfully like positive question. Thank you for that, Bruce.
How do people suck? Why are we awful? Yeah, I mean, because I think people have been amazing. Like,
yeah.
And so what have you like? What have you been like? See, I told you, or
like,
oh my gosh,
that everybody rallied. So I think like there was that like, we're going to make it through Lent. We're going to make it through Lent. The Triduum will be weird and crazy, but like we'll make it to Easter, and we are Easter people. So we're going to focus on the joy that we are found in community and being together, even though it's, faces on a screen rather than, hugs and high fives during the piece. Mm-hmm. And so, so I've been really impressed with that people were like, okay, well, we really have to figure this out. So let's figure it out. And then I'm actually seeing more hope in the Easter season because people aren't just focusing on getting through to Easter. Like it really is, okay, well, let's settle in, let's get a routine, let's figure this out. We're going to make the best of it in all sorts of different worlds. And then start experimenting even more because now we have that baseline of comfort. Yeah. So now they're like, oh, okay,
we can actually do stuff.
Let's try this on top of it. And so like, I'm like, oh, this is so great. Like this is where I expected everybody to be, but everyone was just like, I just need to make it through and figure out what we can offer our people, whether it's morning prayer or whether it's, spiritual communion.
Right. Well, then we saw though I know I did it myself. I watched colleagues where there's so much overfunctioning. It just like, and I think part of me having some experience with this is I'm keeping it way simple, y'all. I don't, and I have not been the person to tell people to try to scale back. That's not been my role, just in general. But now I'm like, just scale back,
and it's a huge comparison issue. Like not everybody. St. John the Divine, Trinity, Wall Street, National Cathedral, where they've just been streaming their services.
Yep, exactly.
For forever.
Yeah.
And so for them to have like, the little pastor in the little town, like leading morning prayer on Zoom, like you can't. That's.
Well, no, and they're like, we want to
watermelons. Like that's not digestible.
We want to record. We want to do all these things. I'm like, why don't you just talk? Show some. I was always like, the fewer times you have to like switch things, the less chance you have a mess and anything, and then build on it and build on it and build on it. But I could just see people like, well, I tried to do all these things. I'm like, well, just stop trying to do all this. And I think part of it is because I think folks were so worried that their communities were going to hold them accountable somehow. And I'm just like, the grace, if anything, is so much more extended right now because nobody is going to blame you for not being able to, do one of those fancy videos where everybody looks like they're singing at the same time. I have to keep telling people, I'm like, that is not Zoom. That is highly produced and edited. Stop asking for that.
Like, that's what like Britney Spears uses, like a click track. Like, let's be very realistic about what we're comparing ourselves.
Like you can't do that. You just can't do that. So
yeah, I also think what I've seen in this new Easter season, and I don't know if you've been witnessing this, Bruce, is that people are actually people, meaning the parish leaders, are recognizing like, oh, we need to bring more people in.
Yes,
to make this viable and vibrant.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge sigh of relief, at least for me, who I'm like, staring at it like you can't do all
this is not sustainable. Yeah. I think there is a lot of that for me in particular. One, I have huge control needs, so I just acknowledge that to my staff and everyone. I'm like, I'm just going to run it. So that's just the way it's going to be. And
hopefully, you at least give yourself at least like one or two co-hosts, just in.
I always exactly. No, I'm like I get the mute button. Like that's mine. So so this past Sunday I was gone, and our guest person who was kind of doing it all was so good. And it definitely had one of those experiences, like he thought everything went wrong, but people watching were like, this is great. Yeah, Jen, you're awesome. But he's like, so Bruce, I did let the co-host control the mute button. I'm like, well, that ain't not happening quite yet. I will.
That's totally fine.
I will.
The co-host had the experience for a second.
For a second, exactly.
For a liturgical second.
Like, don't get used to it. Don't get used to it. I still want the, okay, y'all can stop talking now. But I think there is this kind of needing to almost figure out what does this look long-term, because we're in this for a long time that, and I think the streaming people, they're going to be okay to some extent because that can just continue to do that. I have a lot of friends that are also spending a lot of time recording and producing and all that and then just posting it, which seems exhausting to me, but that's one thing they like doing.
It's different levels. Like if doing it in person, if doing it live, it's in person.
Right. Yeah.
Like makes you really anxious. So that's too many things to attempt to try and navigate. And that's when I'm saying, well, you need to, let somebody else share screen. So then that way you're not trying to mute people and give a sermon and navigate like slides of just like if that's too much, that's when people are sort of flip-flopping and letting their control come in through that video editing process. So that way they can make sure that is the best quality.
You're so kind.
Thank you. I'm trying.
I'm like,
this is like the really positive, helpful, not snarky Sarah.
We'll break that down soon. We're gonna get to that part because I have some colleagues and they're like, oh, I'm spending all day Friday recording. I'm like, well, why are you doing that?
and it's like it is two very different approaches.
Oh yeah,
and it's hard to know which one is right.
Well, I'm fully aware, like not everybody, what I've kind of come to it is at the end of the day, we're just leading people in worship and you're having to figure out what your strength is. So I'm a preacher that doesn't use any notes and I walk around and I do all that. And I will only be able to do that until my mental capacity is able to continue to do that. Right. And I have friends that are manuscript preachers who are going to be far better preachers for a longer term because they are used to thinking about what they're saying beforehand. So
they also have all of those files.
They do, and I have people like
3 years.
Can you print your sermon? I'm like, have you ever heard me preach? I'm like, no, because one, I'm so contextual that you wouldn't make any sense, and two, it's not that I don't study and know what I'm gonna like. I got my areas, but like how I'm gonna get there, like that's not gonna make any sense on paper.
That's a windy road.
Yeah, I'm like, if you're on the journey with me, great. That's during the time. But I have friends who are very much like they're very manuscript. They record it and then they just run it. But the interesting thing is, I'm interested to hear what you think. So having a conversation with a friend, I said, so when are people watching the recorded service? Because they're posting it on Friday night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm like, so are people watching it? So it's full recorded, right?
But are they doing a premiere on Sunday morning?
No, I think that's no, they're not. No, there's no, he's basically, and I think this is where I bet a bunch of folks are, because you start getting into that premiere stuff and really playing with the technical parts of YouTube and it gets a little bit funky for people.
Right.
But, so no, they're recording it on Thursday and then they just post it on Friday and tell people to go ahead and watch. So I asked them, so do you know, and I can't remember if the Facebook analytics tell you when people watch it. But anecdotally, I'm like, so when are people? And they're like, oh, people watch it all the time, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'm like, so
interesting.
When you come,
seen that in my various circles.
Oh yeah, no, there's
people are like either posting on Sunday morning or doing the premiere on Sunday morning, or working the magic of where it's pre-recorded, but it shows up as live on Facebook
on Sunday. Yeah, I was wondering. So I'm like, are your people gonna want to come back to Sunday morning? Like, because we've made it now. Now can you hear my dogs barking? Lovely. This is a highly professional podcast studio. That
we're about to hit my dog's like bewitching hour. So continue on.
I don't have any toddlers to kind of handle either, but, other than that, I have teenagers. We'll see how they do. But yeah, so I was teasing, like, so now you've given people permission to just go to church whenever. And he's like, no, they'll still come back. I'm like, okay. But so you're not seeing that.
It's interesting because we as humans or our pets or our children love routine. And so I would think like that's a routine for those preachers of recording all day Thursday, editing all day Friday, posting, it's gone and with God. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
But for me as a worship attendee, I would find that to be really off-putting. Like that would mess with my worship.
What you do now, yeah.
Of like, but I typically do worship on Sunday mornings. Yeah. So like I would find that very bizarre.
Yeah.
To like be like, oh yeah, no, it's like Saturday at noon, I'm going to go worship.
Right. But it'd be interesting because they're not doing any interaction. Like they're not even trying to get people to interact.
Right. No prayer requests
on any of that. So, but I'm thinking though, okay, it comes back and folks are like, oh, now I don't have conflicts with soccer or other things on Sunday mornings. If I know the service is going to be on at Saturday, I can still watch. I mean, I think this is opening up scarily, just folks deciding what their worship routine and habits and things are going to be like. Our church, for instance, we have, like many, have more people online than we do in person, and ours are fairly legit. We worship between 80 and 100 on Sundays normally, and we get about 80 to 100 logged in now. So with all the people
which is probably even more because of
with all the people. Exactly.
That's always something that I forget about. I'm like, oh yeah, there were 60 people there, but then
but
there were like
probably 25 more. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we're easily above where we were before but what we've noticed is families, intergenerational families are worshiping together now for the first time ever.
Which is pretty cool.
We've brought people who moved away and maybe didn't find a church yet, or ours is a fairly unique theological space, and so I think folks are kind of wanting that. So I'm making the argument for us, even when our sanctuary opens, whatever that's going to look like, that we continue to have some kind of hybrid Zoom experience.
I agree.
That's really Zoom, and now we're not streaming. We're gonna. So I have. You want to plug the event that I'm going to talk at?
Sure. I would be happy to do that for you, Bruce, and for me. So as part of my eFormation convening roles is that this is actually the 4th year we're going to do an all-day, all-online conference. And so it is eFormation conference happening on June 3rd. It starts, unfortunately, for West Coast people at 9:30.
Very early.
But we start with prayer. That's why we start so early. We have 3 opportunities to worship throughout the day. And we're going to have 8 amazing presenters who are each presenting for about a half hour each. And then we also have 2 sort of community gatherings as well. So you'll be able to hear and listen and respond to the presenters, including Bruce. And then also have opportunities to connect with other digital leaders or those who are entering into the digital space.
And I'll make sure I put the registration link in the show notes. And I'm going to do mine on hybridizing worship, because we're really thinking about, like, I have this vision of this DJ station set up in the middle of the front of the sanctuary where it's a laptop. So I'm kind of doing the thing and still being able to Zoom. And I probably will have to give up muting control. I realize that
you will.
I may have to like just give that, but I'm just like this. And now, the great part about this is people are like, oh, okay. Right. I mean, but 3 months ago, people are like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on? But there again, not a silver lining, but just this things that are kind of being birthed out of this difficult time are folks' willingness to be like, oh, okay.
Right. And I think the meme about I didn't know I was going to become a televangelist or whatever.
Yeah.
This mainline Protestant, I'm done with that. I'm really hearing about it. But I think there's a reason why all of those ministries worked so well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And now we don't have to convince people
right
that these are important things to do.
the people who are there, as well as having that connection with those who are, you know, on the other side of the country and watching.
Yep. It's good. I'm really looking forward to some conversations we're going to have. All right, let's take a break real quick, and then we're going to come back and talk a few more things.
Okay.
And we're back. So glad I'm still in my conversation with Sarah, and very excited. So, I mean, I don't know if, because technology is a medium through which we exist, I don't know if there's like, we ever just like are segmented so much. It's like, this is this, and now we can't talk about this. But let me ask, just, you know, as I talk with people about this, I don't lift up the technology component very often. I'm like, we're just being church that happens to happen in a different place. And that we're being the community we've always said we were. Like, we've never thought we were a community bound by our walls. And while we didn't always act like that, now we are. We're like, the table has expanded to the ways we've been talking about it is. But how have you heard people talking about, or really bring it beyond just the tactics, but really thinking theologically, socially, communally about life, congregational life, and communities of faith?
We talked earlier about comparison. And so I think a lot of people are still comparing. And when I am consulting with people, you know, if it's my own colleagues at the seminary or at a parish or at a diocese, I always try to say, focus on what your community does well, and then bring that into a different space. Of really trying to capture, like, you know, Bruce, you were saying that, like, you have a very unique type of Christian community that isn't found in a lot of places. So obviously you're bringing that online.
Yep.
And so, you know, if people have signature programs, or if people have things that they do really well, then I'm like, then bring that in.
Yep.
Like, make it authentic to your community and make certain that people identify with it. That even though, you know, you may not see the walls of the building, but you can still feel the Holy Spirit that is present within it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been really, really important when I've been talking with people, of making sure that it is authentic to the communities that are still.
I've found that people it's not hard to convince people of that as they're getting more bored. Right. I just feel like I'm like, all right, let's like the excitement of being online. It's like, oh, okay, now we've done it. And now I'm like, okay, let's get back to the work of being church.
Right.
And I think folks are like, okay. And I'm almost, sometimes I'm like, all right, calm down, y'all. Like, I still have like, so the church I'm at has I call them kind of like, they're just pain in the ass justice people, which I love, you know.
You're so blessed.
I really, I mean, it is so awesome. But then there are times I'm like, oh my God, y'all are exhausting, because they just want to, like, we got to keep. And I'm like, yes, we do.
Yeah. I mean, especially during this time where, like, all of these inequities that were always there are suddenly in a good and righteous way, like, being magnified. That it is so clear that we do need to go out there and dismantle some systemic racism.
Well, it's just like, I've had these moments. I'm like, oh man, I helped to make this community really comfortable at this pretty quick. Like, they're like, okay, we got it. Let's go.
Right.
Like,
checking that box.
Can you struggle just a little bit more? Can you tell me a little bit more how awesome I am? Or let's just be there for a little bit. But no, they want to get on the work of the church, which is great. Right. I think it's great. I have a question for you. Did you all have conversations or debates, controversy about communion?
I knew that this was where this was headed. So the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, also known as the Royal Wedding Preacher, Michael Bruce Reyes, he sent out a pastoral letter to all bishops' dioceses, to the entire church, and said that's not something that our constitutions and canons provide for. And
that's and still, are folks doing it anyway?
So we do have spiritual communion. That's the option. But I also have witnessed people like the National Cathedral is still doing communion. They're still blessing communion, doing the Eucharistic feast. Like I've seen people with their cups of wine and their little plate of pita, and are like, it's time for communion.
I'm doing it. I know. I mean, part of it's like, what are they going to do? Like, that's not real.
Exactly. And it is people of varying theological, like, on
Look
the,
at you
on the
being,
varying
look at you
theological spectrum that I
being all
witness.
careful.
It is the world that I live in. And so like I've seen it happen on my social media feed.
I'm not going to name them because I don't want them to
No,
get.
I can't.
I don't want them to get put into Episcopal jail. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's probably what happened.
Well, it's interesting because I know that some, I can some friends who are Lutheran early on, their bishop was like, "No, don't do it."
Yeah.
And I had one friend who said, "That's what I get for asking," because they weren't going to put out any statements, and all of a sudden they found out people were going to start celebrating communion. Now, theologically, the Lutherans have a very different understanding of communion, so I could get why maybe they're going to. But in some ways, I'm like, we're just going to do it. Like, it was interesting. So I just like, we're just having communion. Like, that's what we're going to do.
Right. You didn't even blink an eye.
No, I didn't do anything. I mean, and there's certainly privilege and luxury in the positions I've held in our denomination that allow me to do that. So if I were, so our first thing though came out from our court, kind of our courthouse, was no, you wait until you get back together. And this is a good friend of mine. Like, it's somebody that I'm like, come on, man. Like, and so folks are like, Bruce, you still going to do it? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm willing to be brought up on charges over communion. It would have never got that far, but at the same time, I'm like, seriously, come on. Like, this is, yeah. And so we just kept, and then they changed. Maybe 2 weeks later was, okay, we've rethought this, and it is extraordinary. We use all the time, extraordinary times. Yeah. So you can do it.
I love that.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I've seen some weddings, which I think folks are like, that's not a big deal. Not a sacrament for us. But baptisms will be interesting. Yes. I do know of and I had this great idea for baptism. I don't know if it'll fly. Is that the clergy person says the words, the ordained person says the words as the family, the people are doing the water over the child. Like, I can just watching this imagery of siblings.
Would you like do like a baptism to go kit and like send, give them like
no, that's probably too much work.
Like holy water, like give them like a little like holy water vial and like a little thing of oil.
No, we don't. That's not a big thing for us.
Oh, okay. Ours just comes with more stuff attached.
Yeah, that's correct. Exactly. Ours is like, just make sure the water's not cold.
It's true. That is very important.
Yeah. So, but I was like, so I know one's going to happen probably in the next few weeks at a church where the clergy person, I'm like, so you going to record that?
So you're going to have to report back.
I want to see how amazing would that be? Like, it covers by the court, like the ordained person saying the words enough. Like, if we're okay in communion, why shouldn't we be able? Because I still do the words of institution. I do all the things. Why wouldn't that work for baptism? So I'm going to be fascinated to see if that.
Yeah, and we also have in the Episcopal Church, we have a provision for a baptism in extraordinary circumstances, that a lay person could baptize. If there was an issue, like if there was a baby who was about to die or was stillborn, like you, or a person who was about to die who wanted to be baptized and express that, like a lay person could do that.
Right.
Like I think. Please know I did not attend a liturgist class yet, but it could be whatever water was available.
Right.
It could be spit. There's lots of different options.
That's the quote I'm going to put in the show.
Thank you. I'm just getting into trouble and all.
Baptism. It could be spit. It also could be a good band name. It could be spit.
That's good. I like that.
Or a podcast.
But yeah, so I think like there again, extraordinary circumstances applies
Yeah.
to a lot of what we are currently in the middle of.
Right.
And you know, as we've been talking about, there's no other side yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's
no
the
end in sight.
in my organizational kind of mind. I'm like, we can't be captive to these month to month, week to week things. Like, we gotta think about what's happening so we can plan to make it seem as easy as we've made it seem in some ways, because we prepared and we planned. Well, let me ask you, what are your greatest hopes for the future during this COVID new kind of world? And what are the things you are more, not necessarily anxious about, but just what are some of the cautions you would have for folks as we enter into these next months and maybe year kind of living differently together?
One never knows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point, we'll listen back to this podcast and go,
"Oh, it was fun.
You were so naive," which is what I feel like I've been doing for the past 2 months.
Exactly.
So it was a quick turnaround on that for me. I have definitely seen a lot of hope of people learning new technologies, you know, whether they're 85 and calling into worship, or if it's, you know, people figuring out which way their phone goes and how to record. So that to me is really hopeful. And I hope that everybody continues to flex those muscles and to make them stronger, even as we perhaps one day head into our buildings, and recognizing that that, you know, things that are in person can also be transmitted in order to make certain that we have as broad of an audience and as inclusive as possible. So that to me that's giving me hope, and something that more people start to recognize and say out loud, whether it's to their, you know, their governing boards, or to their seminaries, or you know, just to their vestries or to their Christian formation people, of saying, like, this is something that we really need to focus on, and this is the way that we can really deepen the spiritual growth of our people, of making certain that we have these things that are accessible and meeting people where they are.
Great. What worries you?
Hope. My worry is that everyone will be so excited to get back into their buildings that they will forget everything that I just said in advance of that.
Zoom is stupid. We're gonna go back and worship. Yeah, I, you know, it will be interesting. Again, I think, like, I'm pretty confident our community out here, by how we've behaved so far, that's not going to happen. I do really think that our folks are, the longer we can flatten the curve, they're going to be fine. Again, and we come from a place that can afford to do it. I mean, I think there's some privilege and luxury and all that, but I do think there's going to be some folks that as soon as those doors open, we're running back in.
That's that sense of relief. Oh, I don't have to worry about my microphone levels anymore, or you know, teaching Aunt Sally to get on Zoom. That will be a thing of the past. And so I think that is my fear, of that. You know, the Israelites remembered their time in the desert, so like we need to remember this time as well, and incorporate it into our bodies and into our worship and into our stories, and then into our communities, and sort of how we interact with each other, and how we appreciate each other, and how we appreciate our communities of faith.
That's a good way to end this part. So, as I do with everybody when they come on this, I ask 3 questions. What are you listening to? What are you reading? And what are you watching? So, what are you reading these days? And again, as I told you before, like, it has gone from highbrow to just trashy. Like, so, and all of these. So, go for it.
So reading, I'm actually not, because I'm on hiatus from my doctoral program. So I'm taking like a nice, like, I'm not needing to absorb any crazy research articles right now. So I'm taking a hiatus, for which I'm incredibly grateful.
Oh, good.
But I have done a lot of, I've downloaded Apple News on my phone. And so with that, I've gotten a lot more long form articles. So I really do appreciate that medium a lot. So I'm appreciative for that, like Vanity Fair or The Atlantic. You know,
good stuff.
Important stuff.
Yeah. So what are you listening to?
I am definitely a podcast kind of lady. And I love the morning prayer podcast from Forward Movement. So just the Daily Office, the Episcopal Daily Office.
You are such a much better person than I am.
Oh, but I was like, just you wait, Bruce Reyes-Chow. Then I also love Pop Culture Happy Hour. That's one of my favorite ones. What's great about it is that one of my best friends also listens to it. So then that way she and I can be like, what? Were you going to go see that movie? So we have that like commonality. I also made a really amazing playlist based off of community contributions about what church sounds like, of what music makes you think about church, and sort of evokes that church community, because a lot of people love Crowded Table by the Highwomen. I don't know if you've listened to that one yet. And so I heard a song it was a Zac Brown band cover of the Greatest Showman song. And I was like, oh no, this is what church sounds like to me. And so from that, I made this amazing playlist.
Is that a Spotify playlist?
It's a Spotify playlist.
Well,
I'll link it to you.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll add it. Yeah. And it's public and we can all follow it.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. So that's another thing that I'm listening to. And it is really amazing because it's, everything. It's Highwomen and then Lyle Lovett and then Bruce Springsteen. Like there's a nice little like spectrum going on.
Awesome. All right, what's the podcast you listen to that's your guilty pleasure, or do you have them?
I do. I have guilty pleasure everything. I love, there was this one podcast that I listened to that I'm actually thinking about going back and re-listening to about Charlie Manson.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It was so great.
Yeah.
Like, it was so great.
I listened to My Favorite Murder for many, many years, which is a great.
Into it.
It just, you couldn't get into it?
Mm-mm.
No, yeah. So I watched, and then I gave up my kind of true crime time, and I just was like, okay, and then I started listening back, and I'm listening to now. They did one on, the Tiger guy, whatever his name is. So the podcast on it is really good.
Because it was that long form article.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I just started listening to, I don't know if it's Undiscovered or not, but they're doing the one on the Branch Davidians. Which was really interesting and fascinating to kind of get all that.
I've listened to like all sorts of like cult podcasts.
I know. I'm just, yes, I try to walk 5 miles every day.
You definitely need some podcasts.
I do. I call somebody and I walk, and it's really, I tell people it's not because I'm an exercise person, it's so I can eat like crap the rest of the day, and it just makes me feel like I can justifiably eat my potato chips and I'm okay. All right. What are you watching?
So I love trashy reality TV.
Okay, which ones are you watching?
So 90 Day Fiance is
my
favorite. Oh, Bruce, you were not even prepared for this. I really did not let on. And Below Deck is one of my new favorites.
Not even heard of that one. Is there a ship involved?
Yes.
Are they staff?
Yes, it is on luxury super yachts.
Okay.
And it is the staff who are, the steward team or the deck team, and sort of it is about their interactions with the guests, but then and the crazy things that the guests want. But then it is also the interactions with each other, of course. And so especially like in this time of where I'm getting a lot of requests, what I've come to realize is that like I love just sitting back and watching and recognizing that there's absolutely nothing I can do that is already played out, that is life, and I'm just here enjoying it.
And your life is not nearly as crazy. Maybe it is, but probably not.
No, probably not. It does not involve weird meal requests or film parties.
I have one of my kids who's home. We have 3, and 2 of them are home during this time, and one's a huge like reality TV. So they're bachelorettes, and they watch with their friends, and then we watched The Circle with her, which was weird,
I watched The Circle,
which was but it's like it was
a little too much for you.
Yeah, but of course I watched the freaking whole thing, right? But I'm like, oh my, this is what. But of course, we're like, oh,
I know
what's going to happen now. She's my favorite. I hope they get to.
So that has been one of my reality TV has been an escape for at least like a dozen years for me.
So are you into that one where they don't meet each other.
No, I have not seen that one.
I don't. That one's
Love is Blind.
Love is Blind. Yes, because
Yeah.
a lot of people are way into that one now.
So I'm also, you're gonna laugh, but I'm also sort of a hipster when it comes to that sort of stuff. Like, too many people are talking about it, then I'm like, I'm gonna not do that right now.
I had some oppositional viewing behavior. I get that. Like the Doctor Who, I'm like, I'm not watching that.
It's a lot.
Yeah, everybody's watching. I'm not gonna watch it. It
But
took me forever to get.
My thing was like, I got into it because there's an Agatha Christie episode, and I love Agatha Christie. But this was, again, 12 years ago. But then as it got more popular and as Doctor Strange, I was like, oh no, I'm done now. that was a thing that I did, and I don't do currently.
I do get mad at myself when I behave oppositionally, and then I'm like, oh, why'd I wait? Game of Thrones. I guess I'm not going to that. And then finally we've got HBO, and I'm like, this is freaking awesome. Like, this is
so I read the first book before
my goodness.
the series came out, and that was a book where I actually had to read every word, sentence, or else like I would skim read, which is what I typically do. Good librarian habits, obviously,
right?
And but then I would like skim too much, and I would have to go back 10 pages because I'd be like, they introduced 5 new characters and I have no idea who they are.
I had no delusions about reading that book.
Yeah. It's really fine.
Everybody knows their gifts. That would not have been I heard early on, you have to really pay attention. I'm like, oh, well then clearly I can't read that.
That's why they have like the little like character trees of like which houses are happening. But I mean, that's the same thing with plays too, is that they have like the list of who the characters. So there's an advantage to it.
That is true. I am a victim of my own attention span generation. I think I can't. It's too much. But thank you for hanging out with me today. Yeah, I'm glad we could do this. Again, folks, I will post a bunch of stuff in the show notes, both on YouTube and on the podcast. You can download and listen and leave a review and all the places.
Or tell me how much you also love Below Deck. That would be really fun too.
True.
I would really appreciate
I hope
that.
my child does not get into that, because then I'm going to have to watch it. That's what's going to happen.
I'll go ahead and message them on Instagram. Don't worry. I would also love to do this with you, Bruce, in like 3 months when we're like different level of this current state, and just like do like check-ins.
Yeah.
Because your Monday conversation was the first one that I was in with the Corona tide.
Yeah.
And then to have this just about 2 months later, like, is a nice.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much for being on, and thank your husband for patience, I guess, during.
Yeah, I'm not gonna live that down. Apparently, I have like a face when I'm like tweeting very serious churchy things. Apparently, I have like faces like attached to like when I'm like.
Let me just put out there for everybody: you should not ever live that down, because.
I know.
Yeah, that's.
I've definitely learned my lesson.
Did you though? I mean,
probably not.
I mean, it's not like you get to go on another one. I mean, but all right. Thank you for being. We have a great week, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.